Policy. We have the EAMS fund, which is our biggest section of our endowment, and that is managed by two financial managers, Wells Fargo and Phil George, A.G. Edwards. I always get Edward Jones and A.G. Edwards mixed up.
Yes.
And that has performed overall quite well. The other part of our endowment is under a different policy, which is quite a bit more restrictive in terms of what the manager can do, and that is under Sherlock Investments. And so Frank, having studied that, has suggested that we think about maybe revising that policy on the remainder to still stay within the rules that we need to follow, yet give us a little more opportunity for some earnings, because based on the fact that it's in fixed product bonds primarily, it really hasn't had an opportunity to perform the way other investments have. So
The way it should.
Yeah, the way it should. So we're going to take a look at that, and we obviously, it would be a policy that would go to the policy committee, but we want to flesh out what the suggested area. It would probably be based closely on the EAMS policy, but with some minor variations. And as it relates to the dental self-funded plan, Frank again has done some great analytical work to figure out what's the best and what works, and we will continue to move forward in analyzing that. But it appears that by self-funding it, we will be able to keep people covered and do it at a appropriate price.
Wasn't there substantial savings?
Yeah.
$8,000.
Yeah.
How much? I think it was $8,000 a year. I think it was a SU, it's about 50.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's.
Oh, that might have been the whole SU.
Yeah.
So that was.
Yeah, it's a chunk of change. Yeah, definitely. So that's the other. The other issue was we approved a 1-year extension on an unemployment contract. Not employment contract, a contract, I guess, for recording services. Okay, planning and policy.
Planning and policy met this evening to review and discuss the dress code, which I'll be talking more about during new business.
Okay. 6-1. Okay. How about teacher curriculum?
TCC met earlier this evening, and we approved some 1% funds, and then started to make a plan for the fall around reviewing and visiting teachers and seeing what the projects were that they were doing afterwards. So we're starting to develop that plan for the fall and approve some 1%.
Thank you, Ricky.
Mm-hmm.
BAMS?
Has not met since our last meeting.
Nor has WRCC. Okay. Anything else for our consent agenda? Not, is there a motion to approve it?
I move we approve consent agenda.
Second.
And Ricky, second? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? Seeing none, consent agenda is approved. And we move on to administrative reports. Where will we go today?
What's student council?
We start with student council, okay, and we noted Michael has been unable to attend WRCC tonight. What's going on with the student council?
Student council, we just had our variety show. We had it during the senior class's spring fling, and it was semi-successful. We had a bit, sort of at the beginning, the thunderstorm started, so everyone had to pile in. So the acoustics were a little off, but we had about 14 student acts, so it was very fun. And yeah, now next week we have, on Wednesday morning, we have our elections for next year, so we'll see new faces here next year. And as a council, we just wanted to say thank you for having us here. It's been fascinating to sort of see what you guys all do behind the scenes and what we sort of take for granted and don't really know if that's actually happening behind the scenes. So thank you for having us.
Now, did the student council, I know the students, so maybe the senior class sponsored the dunk tank?
That was the senior class.
Oh, okay. So we should talk about that.
We should have some pictures. No, we should have some.
Oh, we should.
Video.
Were you particularly pleased to see somebody go in the
I
dunk?
thought Principal Perrin did an outstanding job in this first round, and when I came through the yard, he decided that he should be in the second round.
And after Dr. Staley had his turn, I was still dry. I don't know what that means. Clearly, he's a pole vaulter.
So I threw 2 balls that were terrible low, and so I just ran up and hit the button. Yeah.
Oh.
So I would like to interrupt and thank Tom for her work she did leading student council this year. You know, in the time I've been an administrator here, it was refreshing to have somebody who's so accessible, and you know, we had several meetings with student council on various issues during the year. A lot of that was due to Tom, who kind of just was always willing to organize a meeting and gather her troops to meet with me, whether it was about dress code or administrative lunches. So I do want to recognize the hard work she did as a student leader this year. So I'm going to miss her.
And the board appreciates your coming to the meetings and filling us in on what you've been up to.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Well, let's do the high school, as long as we're in high school.
Okay, last week the Fine and Practical Arts Department did their annual art show, and they did it in the multi-purpose room, and it was pretty astounding. They really went all out this year, and they actually took floor-to-ceiling tapestries and hung them to create a visual representation of a real art gallery. And so you walked in, and it wasn't like our somewhat sterile utilitarian multi-purpose room. It was really transformed into a really inviting space. The theme was modern, and so they kind of muted the lights, and they hung soft tapestries, and they had hors d'oeuvres served by Miss Cormier's foods class, which is just another form of delicious art. And the senior purchase was awarded to Nicole Reynolds this year. Every year we purchase a piece of student art for our gallery, and we purchased her sculpted clay head entitled Golden Self, and that will be displayed in the school forever. The silent auction that they had raised almost $300 for the Gary Blondin Scholarship as well, and so it's good to see that that's still active. As was alluded to, we had our field day, and that was last Thursday, and we did kind of play around with the schedule a little bit because of the threat of thunderstorms, and it worked out perfectly. You know, we moved the variety show inside and changed the time a little bit, and just as we were moving to the variety show, the skies opened up and the rains fell, and so it worked out perfectly that we were inside in time. You know, a whole bunch of student groups participated. NHS did a barbecue. We had Kona Ice here, and those proceeds went to Honor Society as well. Above the Influence sponsored the dunk tank. The WRCC had a lumber demonstration going on. Art department did face painting, so it was kind of great to see everybody out there enjoying each other's company and just kind of hanging out and having a good time. So we were pleased to see that. Sports are in the playoffs now, and so our spring sports are moving right along. We have several teams in the playoffs. Our girls tennis team they've entered the playoffs as the number 6 seed in the state, and they'll play. They beat Spalding and NAU, and they'll play in the semifinals on Wednesday versus South Burlington. Boys lacrosse are 5th seeded, and they'll host Spalding tomorrow night at 5 o'clock. Girls lacrosse is the 11th seed, and they're traveling to Middlebury on Wednesday. The softball team enters as a number 9 seed, and they'll be going to St. Johnsbury tomorrow. And whoever wins that plays number 1 Essex, so we'll see how that goes. Track and field, we've had a great year for track and field. I want to thank Kevin Freitas and his coaching staff for the job they did. You know, we're lucky to have 30 competitors going on to the state championships. And we also have 5 competitors going on to New England's qualified. So it's nice to see track and field had such a great year. I'm not going to read all the names, but I'd like to kind of pass this list of finalists around so you can see. you know, whether it's track, field, events. We had a great season with them. At the last meeting, I was asked about the family interventionist position and, you know, how effective is it and does it work? And so I did a little bit of research and I talked to some people and kind of got their feedback. The first person I talked to was Bill Jan, who is currently doing that position. And I asked him, I said, you know, do you think the program's worth it and what do you think of the program? And Bill, you know, very thoughtful in his response, said, you're really never going to know if it's designed to help families and stop kids from dropping out. You're never going to know who didn't drop out because of his intervention. He's working with 8 students. He's working with 8 families right now. He's working with 6 of those families still. 2 of those families have dropped out. Hopefully, one's going to circle back next year. So he suggested, he said one thing. He said one thing that he's done in this role that was unintended but is really important is with a lot of the families he's working with, they don't really have a perception or understanding of what services are available in town, HCRS youth services, voc rehab. They don't really have a sense of those services. So he said one of the unintended roles that he's taken on as that family interventionist is to really coordinate the wraparound services for each family. And I hadn't really thought about that, you know, we do have services in town for families, but we don't really necessarily have a concerted way that we help families access them. So one of the things Bill said is that was an important part of what he did, which I thought was pretty telling. And he gave me several examples. So he gave me his list of families and said, why don't you call these families and ask them for some feedback? And so I did. And, you know, I got mixed results. A couple of families wouldn't talk to me on the phone, but they would text with me. And, you know, they had great things to say about Bill. They had great things to say about the program. They said, one family said, he really helps us organize our meetings. And I kind of said, what does that mean? And she, you know, she talked about what meetings with, and she named people. I talked to some people at DCF as well and asked them about their experience working with the family interventions, and they're pretty positive about it. So, you know, I'm disappointed that I don't have raw data to say it works this percentage of the time, but I do think anecdotally, I think the program is helping families, and I think it's helping, you know, it's a $25,000 stipend for the position, so I think it's cost effective. But in terms of knowing whether or not a student remains in school or not as a result of it, that I guess I really can't say. So, unless there's any questions, that's my report.
No, I appreciate the feedback.
Yeah.
I think I guess my thoughts are, is that the role that the high school should be playing? I mean, is there, I mean, we're getting in a social service area, and I don't know how far we can go in that direction, but it's
right. Well, in some ways we're the conduit kind of to that family and of all those services unless they're asked for or somebody else points it out to them. That's probably why there's not a lot of awareness of what goes on. But
and even a perception of, you can talk to somebody about services that are available, and a family doesn't necessarily, or sometimes they're suspicious, sometimes they're nervous about accessing, and so to have somebody who can be that go-between, and you're right, it is going beyond the traditional educational role. But I think in many cases, it's the only way we're going to keep these families not just hooked in with school, but hooked in with services that they need. So.
Well, there is some history too. I remember Suzanne Cooper worked really hard, I think with 15 students for a 2-semester program, and just to try to see if she could implement a higher graduation rate. And, you know, that was quite a number of years ago. So I think it's, you know, it's something that has been ongoing, and I think it's probably, you know, pretty important endeavor.
I think we've saved the money if we've kept one kid out of prison. It's very expensive to put them in prison.
Sure is.
If you just keep them in school, I mean, they graduate, they get a job, they pay taxes, they stay out of prison.
Yeah.
It's a win-win, but, you know, I have some, I'd like to discuss it further at some other point, some other time. I mean, I don't know.
Well, I gotta say too, Mike, I mean, I agree with you in one way, like, should the school be doing social services? That's a question in my brain. But at the same time too, I was reading something just the other day, and it was an article that somebody wrote as an adult, said that they had all kinds of social issues and family problems that were going on in the home, and as long as the kids showed up every day to school, nobody realized what was going on. The school was the only one that was gonna catch it if something was going on, because it was the only place that the kid had to be. And the only times that anybody ever caught on and that social services maybe started circling on a family that needed help was when he missed some days of school. He missed some school, and then the school turned him into the truant officer or something like that to go figure out what was going on. But unless that was happening, if the kids showed up every day to school and did their homework and kept their head down and kept quiet, nobody knew what was going on in that home, when in all actuality they needed major help, major assistance probably. So it's a good question to ask, though. I think we can talk about it more.
Well, I guess my question along with yours, I hear exactly what you're saying, is there any group that is supposed to be coordinating with families? Do any of these services have that as a feature? Because I have no idea what these services are.
I think the only one that would even remotely have that would be DCF, Department of Children and Family. I think when a student gets a DCF caseworker, I think they do some of that.
Youth Services got a grant through, I think it was through DCF, to have a family liaison position at the younger levels. It goes up to middle school, and so this kind of complements that concept.
Well, and that was exactly along the lines of what I was thinking is, if there is such a thing, is there funding available to, so that the school isn't footing the bill for what should be a, you know, town or state
Federal. Well,
action
for it one way, yeah.
It's all gonna come out of your pocket, no matter which pocket it comes from.
That is true.
We have become more social service providers than perhaps our educational mission would dictate, but that's the way things are going, and somebody's got to be there to pick up the loose ends.
Out of necessity.
It's a big philosophical argument that we're not going to settle here. But, I mean...
Yeah, a point well taken.
Yeah.
We have to do it all. Okay, how about dams?
Update you on a few recent school events. We had our annual dress-up dance last Friday evening, and it was a pretty special night for a lot of kids, and the adults had fun. Definitely the most well-attended dance of the year. Did you go to that when you were in middle school?
I can't remember.
No?
I must have.
And you know, the kids basically, you know, wear shirts and ties and dresses, and it's fun. It was really well decorated. We used the multi-purpose room, and kids had a blast, and it was definitely a fun night for everybody. The student leadership put that together, and it was really impressive. Great decorations and everything. So that was a fun night. You know, we've done 3 out of the 4 teams did an end of the year trip this year, and then one of the teams will do a next fall do a trip, which I actually like that concept because they're building team as they start the year. But 2 teams went to Boston, an 8th grade team and a 7th grade team. I went with one of the 8th grade groups last week, and it was a blast. And then one of the other 8th grade teams went to the Essex, it's a high-ropes adventure course. But boy, the group that went to Boston, we went last Thursday, and it was about 88 degrees or whatever, and they rode the yellow school bus and trying to get into the Boston Commons. Those kids were on the bus going in for 4 hours, and then the team did a great job at breaking out activities, and then they had another about 3.5, 4 hour ride back. So, but the kids were just fabulous the entire time. They didn't complain. I would have been complaining. So I was definitely proud of that. A good way to end the year. The other night we had, last week, I went to Dover night, which, Dover hosts an evening at their school where schools can kind of set up a little display and have families of 4th, 5th, 6th graders come and kind of check out the different schools and what they're offering. And we've been drawing Dover students recently, and what I understand, we could be receiving up to 9 of them this coming year, which is big. I mean, that's almost their entire 6th grade class. And that's a shift from years past. So I was able to meet with a lot of families, and it was fun. We have end of the year events, just the half day on the 17th coming up, and field day. So we have a little bit unique situation this year in that the 8th grade usually kind of has their move-up ceremony prior to the last day of school, and this year that's not true. So they're going to come in the morning and we're going to do a field day for the 8th grade, and then all the 7th grades in doing team things, and we'll flip it. And the 7th grade will have a field day, and the 8th grade is going to practice their routine for the ceremony. So you're all welcome. That event happens that evening, the 17th at, I want to say 6 p.m. And I heard it's pretty well attended, good crowd that's coming. I have one staff I'd like to recommend a new hire. We had a couple of math teachers leave this year, and last week I asked you to move Deb Serafino from academic support to the math position. And the second math position, I would like to recommend a gentleman named Tom Patuto. Tom comes to us from Kennedy Middle School down in Woburn, Mass. And he had a 3-year stint there as a math team teacher. His spouse is a physician, a pediatric physician, and they had moved to Wisconsin for a few years during a residency. So he resigned that position, and they moved back to Woburn area, and they ended up hiring him back, and he's been there ever since. And but she's recently accepted a position in this area, and so they're relocating, and we're pretty excited to have him. Russ Janis was on that interview committee. He interviewed very well. We had did a model lesson with him as well, and observed him teaching. His references are really strong. He's a graduate, his undergrad at Fairfield University, and he got his master's in math at Goddard College. And pretty excited. He comes really highly recommended. One of the teachers that puts in a ton of extra time, does a lot of activities with kids after school, stays after. We're pretty excited to have him in a time that's pretty difficult to hire math teachers. Excited that they chose to come to this area. So I would like to seek the board's approval to
Mr. Chairman, I move approval of Mr. Tom Patuto, math position at BAMS. Would you please spell his last name?
Yes.
P-A-T-U-T-O.
Thank you.
Second from Ricky, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? Seeing none, it's unanimous.
Thank you. That's all I have, unless there's any questions.
Just wondering, for the move-up ceremony, are you going to be needing the services of our stellar keynote board speaker at all? Or?
Is that you, or is
No,
that somebody
it's not
else?
me, it's Mr. Davidson. We usually split up the duties of the final ceremonies, but...
And is it your turn?
Well, it's become always the vice chair. Usually the chair does the high school and the vice chair does the middle school.
Okay. Well,
So yes, you're welcome.
yeah.
All right, great. Excellent.
Thank you.
But Ricky really is, because those kids really respond to, most of them know him, and not trying to force him on you, but fabulous job.
Great, love to have you, thank you.
Excellent, thank you.
Does that mean that I don't have to talk?
And I think you still have to talk too, right?
You can introduce him.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, central office.
Yeah, so I'm just passing around a two-page document, which was the final draft of the Education and Governance Legislation, H361. We had a conversation Thursday, at the SU board meeting in Putney. And this was the document that we used to just highlight the changes. So I don't necessarily think we'd spend a lot of time tonight, but any board members that were there, Pat and Russ and Ruth, I'm sorry, Russ, Bob, yes, thank you. Steve, whoever was there. There were 28 of these. So if you look at the column bold print highlights on the first page, this is the preferred structure that the legislation is looking to create these supervisory districts as opposed to supervisory unions. The alternative structure is the supervisory union that we do have. Unfortunately, the incentives that are further down on the page, incentives to merge governance, those incentives are pretty substantial. 10-cent reduction on the tax rate the first year, decreasing to 8, 6, 4, and 2 cents over a 5-year period. For districts that are, let's say in our case, SU districts that become supervisory districts, you get that type of financial incentive. What we talked about on the backside, some of the anticipated savings that we think we could accrue from this consolidation. And what Frank Rucker will do is show some sample budgets for each district, showing what the typical budget would be versus the school district budget or the supervisory district budget with the tax reduction as part of that, just so you can see the model. One thing that I stressed with the, especially with the smaller districts, sometimes school districts are afraid because they think they're going to be consumed by these larger entities and that they lose their school or they close the schools and that sort of thing. I don't believe that would be the case for any of our schools. We have schools of 120, 50, 150, 170 smaller schools. Those schools are not going to be taken over by other schools. It's not like Vernon and Guilford are going to take over each other, or Putney and Dummerston. But what I think is important is we could create school councils where we have the 2 representatives from each town be on a school council along with the principal, parents, and community members, probably like a 5 to 7 member board, and that would be kind of the equivalent of the district board that they have now. They would advocate for those schools. They would do kind of the nuts and bolts on the action plans and school improvement issues. And then let's say the supervisory district board would almost act like you do as a BUHS 6 board. So there's a lot to think about with this. Just wanted to introduce it tonight, and we'll have more information sessions on this.
And we'll need to move along relatively quickly in order to be able, if we were to take advantage of the incentives that it's offered.
I don't understand the incentive. We just go from a union to a district, or do we have to incorporate people, other schools? Or?
You would have, no, it would be our own supervisory union that becomes a supervisory district. If a school like Marlboro wanted to be part of our district, that would be fine.
But if we just
it doesn't have to be.
If we just change the
You're changing the governance. You're going from 6 individual boards to 1 pre-K-12 board.
And that nets us a 10-cent...
10-cent
That's going to save us all kinds of money, Mike.
Yeah, that's simple.
Well, the other thing,
but it might
really, when we get into more details, when we consolidated special ed, this current year, we're saving about $400,000 because of the flexibility of staffing. Speech-language pathologists had always been, probably for about 5 years, 8 years, through the SU, and it provides us a lot more flexibility in terms of staffing those positions. And that's what we're finding with the special ed consolidation. We think we would find that type of savings throughout the supervisory district outside of the 10-cent reduction.
So who initiates the conversation? Who?
We do,
Okay.
right here.
Okay.
At the supervisory union level and at each board level. We'll probably set up some meetings that when Frank has some models to look at, we'd like to look at those, share that. The state is setting up some regional meetings, group meetings with VSBA, Vermont School Board Association reps, that they can help, navigate this sort of stuff.
So how does this affect this board specifically?
Well, this board would no longer exist. You'd be part of a pre-K-12 supervisory district board.
So one board oversees all the schools in the district?
Yeah.
So there's no longer any individual boards?
Right. Unless, as I said, we create school councils, which would be in effect those smaller district boards.
And school councils have no teeth.
Well, I disagree with that, because it's the school if you want to get into that, then a school district board has no teeth. Unless you want to cut staff. Because you decide probably about 10% of the budget in terms of, what reality is if you want to operate a school. So I would say a school council would have as much teeth as a district board
And
in terms of advocating for that school. I don't know. I just feel in our district we're in a good position because our schools are not in jeopardy of closing because of a consolidation in governance. So, we'll have more discussion about this.
I know we'll have more discussion around, but I'm just thinking back to, just a minute ago, you talked about the WSCSU meeting when you had the other night, like, those 28 of you, like, how many people would be on an SD board?
I think 11.
Okay.
I think you'd have 2 representatives from each of the outlying districts and probably 3 from Brattleboro. To have an odd number, it might be 13, but.
I was just thinking back to the days when this board was like 17 people.
That's what I think.
That was unmanageable.
You couldn't even have a quorum.
That was horrible, yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it's got to be more than 9, but probably 11 is. So more to come.
What's the timeline approximately?
Well, I think there's got to be discussion, obviously, but in terms of adopting it for the first year of incentives, it would have to be at town meetings next year. This coming.
I don't believe the legislature's done with it either.
Probably not.
I think when it comes January, I think there's going to be a lot of tinkering with this thing.
So the earlier you do it, the greater the savings, but the timeline might not fit into.
Yeah. I don't think any school district is going to push too soon if they don't have the data that supports it.
And if you don't do it, the only thing you don't get is the incentive, is that right?
Right.
Yeah. So
For the first couple of years, and then at a certain point, then we will be told what we're going to do, and it's usually better to develop your own prescription before it's handed to you.
probably they will have a model eventually,
Yeah.
of what it would look like, right?
Yeah.
In terms of,
I think they'll use districts like
Participation.
ours as models.
I'm sorry?
I think they'll be using districts like ours as
Yeah,
models.
that's what I was wondering. Yeah.
And we do a lot of the, the coordination is pretty strong in this
Yeah,
unit.
absolutely.
That's why I say if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
I just worry about it from a policy perspective, because a lot of the policies we see come out of the SU, it looks like nobody even read them.
Well, I disagree with that. I know people have. And then you rework them for the high school, and there can clearly be a system to maintain that.
A lot of it comes down to the opportunity for kids too, and the more you have units working together, the more opportunities there are to communicate opportunities for the kids back and forth, on the positive side.
Yeah, it's a little bit of change, but I think it could work.
More to come on that one.
Yeah.
For sure. Okay, board chair, I would only report that Ron reported on the SESU board meeting. It was interesting to be at that and hear the discussion. I also was privileged to attend the BUHS planning meeting last week, was that? 2 weeks ago now, at which I perhaps contributed little, but spent most of my time trying to understand acronyms, which there seem to be plenty of, but I did enjoy the breaking down into small groups and talking about the action plan and how the changes in the methodology of instruction coming up would affect our action plans. And I just enjoy seeing the group in action. It's the administrators and department chairs primarily. And so I appreciate the opportunity to sit in on that. Okay, I believe that's it for administrative reports. Is there any unfinished business? If not, we'll move on to new business, and there is a fair amount of that. First item is summer meeting schedule, and we are, recent years, in the habit of having one meeting each in July and August, with also a planning session. And I went back and looked at last year's calendar, and I see we moved the July meeting from the first Monday, because it's that first week of July is a tough week to get everybody. With the 4th of July, we moved it to the second Monday, or actually it was the third Monday because it was the 15th, but we moved it to the middle of the month. And we can do the pleasure of the group, but I would suggest that maybe we want to consider that again this year, which would put that July meeting on the 13th. Get it a little further away from the holiday.
Administrators can do that?
I think so.
At this point, yeah.
Okay.
Do we have to vote on these?
Well, I think we just can come to
Right,
consensus.
consensus, yeah.
Okay.
7 o'clock?
Yeah.
Did we
Okay.
do a 6:30 at any time? Did we do that last summer?
We
6:30?
might have.
Well, we did for the planning meeting. We started that earlier. I'm okay with 6:30. It's a little tough for me at 6 o'clock, but
6:30 is fine with me. I mean, if everyone wants to do 6:30.
Well, except we're going to do TCC.
Yeah, except we may have
Right.
TCC and planning
Seven's
policy
fine.
that night.
yeah.
7.
Why don't we, since we're kind of in that routine, why don't we go for 7 o'clock on July 13th? And in August, I didn't go back and check how far into that, but it seemed to me that we wanted to avoid a meeting right along the first week of school startup, because everything all was going on there. We
So
did
the
the planning
17th.
session right around the 17th would be,
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that would be good.
that would be actually the third Monday. Because then the teacher in service starts does it start that week?
Next week.
Oh, the following week, okay. All right.
Yeah, because school's not starting until the 31st, Kurt.
Right.
Oh, really?
Teachers begin, we have meetings like on the 24th, the actual in-service starts on the 26th.
Yeah. Okay. So 7 o'clock, or, well, actually, we would start that one earlier.
Is that the cookout at your house?
Yeah, that's, if the new deck is done, otherwise they'll have to fall through the deck. It won't be very good.
So we start that a little early?
Yeah, I believe we started at either 6 or 6:30. Is anybody who remembers that, right?
That was almost a year ago, Brian.
I can't remember.
So
what
that's
I-
Monday, August 17th?
Yeah.
Well, you say 6 is tough for you, try
Well,
to
I can,
6:30.
okay, how about 6:30?
Fine.
And we'll do some planning and pull out what we said we were going to do last year and take a look at it. And
At the Whetstone?
At the,
Is that right?
that's a nice quiet place.
Yeah, on the deck?
I see you met August 11th at 6 p.m.
Yeah, just.
At 6, okay.
Yeah, for goal setting.
Why don't we do, I'll figure out, 6, I'll work 6.
6:15?
Because you probably won't have.
6:30, why don't you just,
Yeah, 6:30 is
Okay,
fine,
all
Robert.
right, let's stick with 6:30.
Is that here?
or some other nice place.
Yeah,
be decided.
We'll see if we
Yeah.
can
How about location to be determined?
Yeah.
TBD.
It used to be at David Dunn's house, right?
And what's the
Yeah, I
date?
know, well,
It's August 17th.
I know the
maybe we
Seventeenth.
can cram everybody.
The other question I have, we have not had a second June meeting often, and I'm not sure if we need one.
We decided last meeting not to have
Last
one.
meeting, yeah. Because of all the
Thanks for letting me
activities.
know.
We did that when you weren't here.
Okay, good, thank you.
We nixed that.
So no meeting June 15th.
No.
Good job.
Just all the graduation activities are gonna be at 2 or 3 different
We
things
did it
that
for you,
week.
Ron.
Thank you.
And I passed that along to BCTV, who asked to have time on the agenda as part of their routine that they have to do to talk to all their constituents about service and so forth. So we will do that later on, probably later in the summer, but so they're aware. Okay. What's next? Authorization, this is the typical, what I call summer rules, like at the golf course. And one is authorizing the teacher curriculum committee to make hiring decisions during the summer months. And we need to vote on that.
Mr. Chairman, I move we authorize the teacher curriculum committee to make hiring decisions during the summer months.
Second.
And second by Sean. Any discussion on that? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? Seeing none, is unanimous. And then we move to the next one, which is related to the Finance Committee to approve warrants during summer months.
Mr. Chairman, I move we authorize the Finance Committee to approve warrants during the summer months.
Second.
Okay, Lori, any more discussion? Not all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Seeing none, it's approved. And then finally, authorization for the BAMS Committee.
Mr. Chairman, I authorize the BAMS Committee to conduct financial and personnel matters during the summer months.
Second.
Second by Ricky. Okay. Discussion? Not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Seeing none. Summer authorization has been approved. Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
And it occurs to me it's not the appropriate place in the agenda, so I think what I'll do is I'll make a note to myself and I'll follow up at a later time. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Sorry to be so disruptive. I hate to violate the open meeting law by speaking of something out of place on the agenda. Since we're on camera.
There's a place for others.
Yeah.
Are we there yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got item E, which is student dress code.
I'll wait till other.
Yeah.
Are we up to dress code?
Yes.
Well, we're just on first reading, so I don't believe we need a motion or anything. You should have all seen the draft that was distributed with the agenda. In planning and policy today, we discussed just a couple of alterations to it, both in the apparel section. Exposes the midriff while standing or sitting normally should be changed to exposes the torso, as that also covers the sides. And we had a discussion about the exempting bra straps clause. Steve brought up that clause being in there brings gender back into the policy, which is something we really wanted to take out. So as long as it's understood that the incidental bra strap slippage is not considered showing undergarments in this policy, we don't necessarily need to have that codified into the policy itself.
So are you saying we're getting rid of that?
We're removing the exempting bra strap. that will go away. And we're changing midriff to torso.
Okay. So just for clarification, BAMS has been discussing some possible variations, which we already have in our current dress code, the no hats at BAMS and so forth. So can that, just so I understand, can that all be just handled under BAMS handbook?
Yeah, our discussion on that was that basically the dress code already limits excessively revealing apparel. What that actual wording means can be defined in the BAMS student handbook, and that should cover it.
I met with some teachers a week or two ago and got some initial feedback, and then I'm gonna follow up Thursday with some students. We're having students sign up to meet with us during the day, and then also meet with the staff after school, voluntary, to talk more about it, but hoping to just put in a few things that they would like to see in there. Well, say hoping, open to that in our own handbook.
So that would sound to me like that can be handled on the side, and doesn't necessarily need to be part of the overall policy.
Yeah, Keith may have just said this, but kind of as a procedural.
Procedure versus policy.
Yeah.
And you're
That way-
comfortable with that, not it being handled as an internal procedure with you, with
Right.
BAMS? Yeah.
That we talked about, that way you can have a policy in place for 10 years or so, and as the trends change, you can adjust with them, with your handbook, you know,
Yeah.
to address specific things without having to change the policy every time we have an issue come up.
And I think too, part of our conversation too also stemmed from the fact that with three schools having to deal with the same policy, the high school needed to do something that the middle school doesn't need to do, so this gives them some flexibility with the student handbook, or the career center may really need to put something in that's really appropriate for the career center that's not appropriate for somebody else, so.
Yeah, like that would, for instance, would be in their handbook, I'm sure, is the protective footwear.
Exactly.
You know,
Right.
that we don't need at BAMS.
But yeah, so I think we're pretty much all together now on this policy and just ready to just move forward.
So it'll appear on the next,
For second reading.
let Barb know to put it on for the next reading with the slight revisions of May. Good.
So that would be in the July meeting?
Yes.
So we'll still be able to go through the procedures and have it ready, because then we would do the approval in
We
August.
should be able to approve it in August.
Yeah.
Is that okay in terms of timeframe?
Well, yeah, it's fine. I mean, we'll have to, in our student handbook, which goes to press next week, we'll have a sentence saying the BUHS dress code is under review and a new policy will be in place for the start of school. And then we can add that in now.
So July 13th would be soon enough for that? You still have
No,
to do it
it
early?
actually goes to press this week, later this week. We're looking at the final draft now. That's not a big deal, though. And then what we do is when we post the student handbook online, we'll insert the new policy, so online it'll be fine. It's
Well,
not a big deal.
The other thing in terms of timing and planning for students is the fact that it is not a more restrictive code than what we have, or any great new twist to it that,
Right.
you know, would be throwing them a curve at the last minute.
What we did last time we changed the dress code, we probably do again, is probably send home whatever the current draft is and say this is coming up for a third reading on August, I think it's the 13th or 17th. We anticipate this will be the dress code. That'll be okay.
That's good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Policy Committee. Okay, so there's, yeah, we have one other item on the other.
Thank you. This is actually a good time to bring it up. I noticed when I was reviewing the Rutland Herald recently that they appear to post all of their policies. The school board, when I say they, the school board posts policies that are coming up for vote in the legal section or the classified section. And I just thought that that seemed like a really good idea, because I know that our families pay attention to what we're doing in our minutes and our agendas and things like that. But if we could give some kind of special recognition to the fact that a new policy is up for review, and then that way people will see, and if they have an interest, it's just another way to reach out to the community to encourage their
You
involvement.
mean they post the entire policy?
I don't think it's the entire policy, I just think they say the name of the policy, and the name is usually, you can get a pretty good sense of what the policy is going to be about from the title, and they can probably get the hard copy online, or...
So you're saying in the meeting, like we have a schedule of meetings.
Yes.
So BUHS 6, we could say this policy. is up for review.
What I could do is I could bring with me to the next meeting a copy of an example of what they do in Rutland, and we don't have to follow the same exact idea, but if there's consensus that it's a good idea, then why not?
So you said it's in the legal notices
I
section?
think it's in the legal notices
Yeah.
section.
That costs money.
It would, yeah, it would seem that if we, since we warn the meetings, if we were to include that with a warning, it might get more attention. And I know you're an attorney, so you're looking through all those things, but I'm not sure how many of the general public looks through all the legal notices.
I always read the legal notices.
Well, I imagine.
Two of us do.
My father told me if you want to know what real news is, read the legal notices.
Okay, so the board wouldn't be opposed to me bringing a sample to the next meeting for further discussion. Thank you.
Okay. I would entertain a motion for a short executive session in personnel.
I will go
Unless
into
there's anything
executive
else.
session for a personnel matter.
Second.
Second, Lori. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.